Now I come to Ottonian art, and this is basically Germany. Now the German states were subject to Viking attack as well as the attacks of others. By 919, the Carolingian line was withering away, and a man by the name of Henry Fowler, Duke of Saxony, will seize the crown, and he begins the dynasty of illustrious German kings. But he couldn't exercise his authority over other powerful dukes. There's a whole story to this, but basically the German dukes, rulers over these smaller provinces, will stand up against the German king and say, look, we're not happy with your rule. The German king, who also controls southern Europe or southern Italy at that point, will say, fine, you guys take care of Germany, I'm going to take care of southern Italy. Of course, southern Italy being much nicer than Germany, well, pretty much any time of the year. So not until his son Otto I, or Otto the Great, do we see a full assertion of the monarchy. In 962, Otto claims to be the Holy Roman Emperor, and he too will use the church in pious and practical ways. He will encourage learning, but by 1050, less than 100 years later, Ottonian power is falling. And during this time, we see the construction of St. Michael's in Hildesheim. Here we see the interior, very basic structure. But when we look at the exterior, you see a church that seems to be made up of a mass of cubes and cylinders, something. Well, think back to your childhood. If you ever played with those wooden blocks where you have red rectangles and blue squares and yellow triangles, it's almost something that you could build out of one of those block sets. The parts don't necessarily seem all that related. And the structure, when you break it into its individual parts, is very, very basic and creates a very austere sort of form. And getting to the history, there's a man by the name of Bernward in 993 who becomes abbot of Hildesheim. He's smart and ambitious. Eventually he'll be canonized, which is how one becomes a saint, in the 12th century. He's responsible for its construction. Where this gets interesting is he actually travels to Rome to look at other structures and then comes back to supervise the construction of St. Michael's. And this will include looking at the lost wax method for casting bronze. But in this case, when we look at the church, what we're seeing is a massive stone structure. Even inside, it's remarkable for the period. And while it has been modified since its first construction, it does have some of those Roman elements, almost Romanesque elements to it, with the giant arches, both along the aisle on the outside, but also along the apse inside. When we move outside, this towering structure of stone, something we haven't seen much of since the Romans, where he's taking some of those ideas from Roman architecture and incorporating them into this church.